Hey everyone, we are going to be doing a complete teardown of a Class 4 Transport Gecko today. And the goal is going to be a whole buffalo. We're going to use every bit. Before we get started, let's look at equipment. The upgrades that really help in this particular deconstruction are tether upgrades. The amount of tethers as well as the lifetime of the tether both help a lot. Because we're going to be moving a lot of pieces and some of them are pretty heavy. Because of that, you know, all these strength and force and range upgrades help too, but the biggest one here is tethers and tether lifetime, because that's what we're going to use to move all the big pieces. The second useful upgrades here are in the helmet and this O2 capacity. We're going to be spending a lot of time inside the ship, and so it's going to take a long time to go back to get oxygen, and so having that O2 upgrade gives us a little bit more time, gives us a little bit more wiggle room to avoid having to go back to the master jack. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that out. Sometimes there's oxygen that spawns on the ship, pretty commonly actually, but not always, so it's nice to have that little leeway if we need it. So we're going to try and do this in 3 work shifts, so this whole process is going to take about 45 minutes. The first thing we're going to do on the first day is try and separate most of this outer hull and get it processed. And then in the second work shift, we're going to do all the electrical and mechanical stuff, and then the third work shift is going to be finishing up any extra straggler electrical mechanical stuff and slicing up the inner hull and sending the inner hull to the furnace. So I'm going to go in here now. Notice here that we're pressurized. This central room has a lot of stuff in it. And if you depressurize this central room, a lot of stuff flies around, it can cause problems. I'm checking in here to make sure that this hatch to the outer hull crawl space is open. This is open. This is open. So all these components are depressurized. This is another airlock. Now, by virtue of having the interior, this main door, depressurized, when I go ahead and hit these airlocks again, it's going to depressurize this airlock and also open the outer door. So it's going to make it easy to get in and out. That's important because the next thing we're going to do when we go into the crawl space, one of the things we're going to do is sever those airlock connections. I'm going to grab the fuel there because it's there. I'm going to grab the data here because I see it. And I'm just going to go ahead and open the doors for the other areas. So here into the cockpit and into these other areas. Some of these are pressurized, and my experience is that most of the time it doesn't matter. The last thing I'm going to do before I go into the crawl space is I'm going to take these out. I'm going to take out 4 of these storage bins because one of our goals in the crawl space is going to be to sever the cockpit from the rest of the hull. And this second square, if you kind of think of, if you kind of think of it, the cockpit is the first square, this second portion with the atmosphere regulator is the second square, and this third entryway is the third square. That second square is where I like to make the cut. I'm not trying to be super precise, especially when it comes to aluminum. Aluminum is just not valuable. So I call this a whole buffalo, and I'm going to try and use as much as possible. But if there's ever a place where I'm concerned about saving time versus wasting aluminum, I'm going to waste aluminum. Alright, I'm going to use my saw cutter. I'm going to cut these cut points as quickly as possible. And my first goal here is I'm just going to go around the entire crawl space, top and bottom, front to back, and cut everything that attaches the inner hull to the outer hull. That includes these airlocks. And my strategy for dealing with these airlocks is hold down the brake button so you don't float around, because firing the saw cutter can make you float around. And just do front, back, left, and right sides, and that should do it. We'll see in a minute. In fact, I just saw a little crack of daylight. That tells me that we did in fact sever this outer hull section now, which is what we want. We're going to do more cut points. I'm going to do the other airlock here again. Again, I come up here, hold down the brake button so I don't move, make one cut, and then do my other cuts for the other 3 walls through that first cut. Notice here that when you aim at a wall with the saw cutter, the red dots that pop up will show you what you're aiming at. So I'm going to be careful here. There's this coolant tank, which I never like, but we should be pretty safe. I'm going to try and avoid the atmosphere regulator on the inside. Exact same strategy. I'm going to hold down brake. Might move a little bit. I'm going to cut through. I'm going to try and cut through all 4 panels. With this one in particular, I'm going to make sure there's these 4 little braces that I want to make sure I cut through. I try to cut through those with the saw, but it's hard to sometimes. Hard to make sure. I can also turn on my light. That would help a little bit. Alright. So now the cockpit is severed from the outer hull. Wherever I see these fuses, I'm just going to go ahead and grab them while I'm here. The way the fuses work is you want to pop them when they're dark. So it goes 1, 2, 3 dark, and you just want to grab them when they're dark. So any other fuses, any other things I see in here, I'm going to save the coolant tanks and fuel tanks till after I separate the inner hull from the outer hull. But fuses, airlocks, and the cockpit I'm going to do on this first pass through. Popping the fuses helps. And you also want to check in here between the keel sections. Don't forget any of those. Popping these fuses helps. Oops. There we go. Popping these fuses helps because it de-electrifies the electrical equipment inside. You do need to be careful back here next to the engine systems because we've got a lot of fuel. I think these sparks can set off fuel and coolant tanks. So wherever you think the sparks might hit a fuel or coolant tank, always take the time to use the stinger head, the point head, instead of the saw head. Alright, and I think this is the entire top. So my next step is I'm going to go down to the bottom. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Go through the entire ship. Got 4 coolant tanks in this one. That's quite a few. I'm going to try and be as careful as possible so as to not kill myself. Alright, so I'm going to go down the one side, I'll come back the other side. There's not typically... Oops, running low on oxygen. Alright, I'm going to see if I can go quick. Although I frequently get caught in here, so maybe that's a bad idea. You know what, one of the things we're going to do later is start popping open these bottom aluminum panels. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. These big aluminum panels, you can get them open. It takes more than one full charge of your cutter head. Again, aluminum is just not valuable. Oh, no oxygen here. Alright, I know I saw some in the utility room. Oh crap. I did not see any. Alright, we're gonna run. Okay. I was hoping to avoid that. So over the 3 work periods, this is not really time critical. You've got a little bit of time to play around. But individually, getting all this done in the first work period is a little time critical. I can just go ahead, since I already have gotten in there, I'm just going to go ahead and pull this off since it's floating away already. And that'll be an easier access here into this section. So, we were on the top, we were cutting things. And no, we had gotten down to the bottom already. Okay. So we'll go back down to the bottom. We were on this side. Okay. And we want to go all the way back to the engine room. Cutting as we go. Want to be especially careful here around these coolant lines before we discharge those. There we go. Nothing ruins your day quicker than getting started on a project like this and then destroying the reactor on accident. Alright, so I think there might be one or two more. But most of... a few more. Alright. So now, most of the ship is... the outer hull is detached. The outer hull should be entirely detached. So I'm just going to use my body and push my way out. And I'm going to start sending this stuff to the processor. The little pieces in the middle go pretty quickly. The pieces in the front and the back are much larger. Take a lot longer time to move.
Right, Cutter, you got 5 minutes left of this
We are running behind on this shift. So I'm just going to start tethering everything. One tip here is if you're having trouble getting good tether connections because they turn red and disappear, is to start from the processor side. And so they start from the processor. That one's red because it's being blocked by the other piece. Start from the processor and go to the piece, and that way you know it lands on your piece on the outside. Come on. Lands on the outside. There we go.
Valuable object processed. Credits deposited. Object not accepted. Please
Alright.
your training.
There are some mechanical things I should have grabbed. There's some door switches on the airlock. These big two front pieces, these are going to take a long time to move through. I'm going to do a lot of tethers on them. While it's coming out, I'm going to come in here. There were coolant tanks too. Again, coolant tanks are mainly hazards, so you can send them to the barge for money. But if you just want to ignore them, send them into the processor or whatever, you're just losing out a little bit of money. A tip here is if you have something grappled and you press the right mouse button, it will draw it to you. So like a physics gun, which is a lot quicker than moving your body. I move my body a lot because I'm not good at remembering that, but that's what happens. The keel should be entirely separated too. Now this big piece, the middle piece here, oh, and we're out of tethers. Middle piece here is going to start moving as well. This whole thing opens up. Once we get all the nanocarbon off the outside, the whole ship opens up. Oxygen tethers. Always get extra oxygen. You don't ever want to make a second trip for it. We've got a similar problem with the with this front piece. Now this has a cockpit in it. The cockpit does have some computers, notably. It has some storage bins and things like that that we can send down to the barge. Again, if you're really trying to use every piece, come on. Trying to use every piece, you're going to want to take the time to cut those out. Honestly, using every piece, oh goodness, the entire keel is still attached. Even though I cut those attachment points. I thought I cut those attachment points, I could just be wrong. Okay. Okay. I'm going to try and get these in. There we go. Get everything in. Now you can see we've really stripped away most of the outer hull. So here inside the cockpit, I'm losing computers. There's a coolant tank. Again, if you're really trying to get everything, there are more than enough computers on the rest of the ship, but they're there next to the barge. Sorry, they're there next to the cockpit. Alright, I'm gonna get this moving. I'm about to run out of time.
Please revisit your training. Valuable object processed.
But at a minimum, if I can get these tethers started, the tethers will persist to the second work day. And they'll keep pulling stuff for me. Okay. So, most of the time you can see we spend inside cutting attachment points. But once we have all those tethers out, the rest of the ship just kind of pulls apart. So now we have the inner hull taken off. We're gonna leave this the rear outer hull. We're gonna leave for next time with the mechanicals. We're gonna have to take these nacelles and deal with the thrusters. I can do the keel, shouldn't I? We can do the keel here. Get that stuff flying in. And we're in a good space for the next. We're in a good spot for the next next work shift. So this work shift is not our most valuable. It's our second most valuable. The next one, we do all the mechanicals and electrics, is going to be a lot more valuable with the reactor and all of that. Most of our value here coming from nanocarbon, as you can see. But each workday is about $500,000, right? So here we're clearly making quite a bit of money just on the outer hull. Alright, so we're just going to check our equipment for repair. And, oops. F is repair. And E is confirmed. And we're going to go ahead and continue salvaging. So, our goal here is the electric and mechanical pieces. This is going to do most of our work order. So the only work order we won't finish today potentially is the aluminum metal work order. So this is the generator. Gonna go ahead and fling that down. Pretty heavy. Make sure it actually goes in.
Salvage secured.
We already hit the fuses earlier. And we're gonna start looking at mechanical pieces. So, here we go. These doors, airlock consoles happen to be here because the airlock is cut open now. And there's a few different ways we could do this. We could start in the back with the reactor. We could start in the front with electrical. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and start with electrical and mechanical. You'll notice, I guess it's, you know, we're in early access. You didn't see the glow until it was finally ready to, oops. It was finally ready to go apart. So, this is the room right behind the cockpit. Has a lot of computers in it. So this is our first computer-rich room. There's also quite a few computers in the main passenger cabin, which we'll also do. We'll start here. We got the fuses again on the outside of the hull, so we shouldn't have any electrical hazards as far as I understand the game. There's always extra things you can pull out, right? There's seats, there's posters that are worth something. The posters aren't really worth anything. The seats are worth a little bit. Oops, I knocked that, so it sparked on me. What else is there? Did I destroy? I destroyed the posters. Alright. So, the second place we're going to go in here is this this main passenger cabin. So again, I already cut this door open. Oops. Gotta be careful not to whack yourself. Alright, now I've got enough seats out. I'm going to fly up in here. One of the nice things about just melting the outer panel is because all these seats are just open. And you can very rapidly get rid of them. So once I clear out enough space, I'm just going to start pulling everything off the walls and sending it down. So the Atmo regulators are, I think, electrical. The door consoles are mechanical.
deposit accepted.
And all the computer terminals here along the roof, these are electrical. So we can look at the work order. We need quite a few more electrical.
Account credit applied.
16 more. You want to be careful with these, especially in here, because, as you saw before, if you knock the electrical stuff against the wall, even if you've already gotten the fuse for it, the electrical items can start sparking and destroy other electrical items. So if we just, you know, one bad spark can destroy all of our computers in here, which we want to avoid.
Salvage deposit accepted.
And we're just pulling stuff off. There we go.
Salvage secured. Credits deposited. Salvage deposit accepted. Credits transferred.
Pulling, pulling, pulling.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
Alright. So there, we need one more electrical. So my goal here is gonna be to get the work orders done first and go back for later.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
So, how many mechanical? We need 8 mechanical, 7 mechanical. We're gonna go ahead, we will pull off this panel. Not sure why that one aluminum panel goes to the barge. We're gonna open this guy up. This is the ECU. We're gonna pull out these coolant tanks. And this will purge the coolant out of the lines in the engine compartment. Oops. So, the ECU is now safe to move. I'm going to keep the mechanical stuff in mind while I go through the ship. There's a few sources, door locks, locks potentially in the rear. Alright, there we go. Now the ECU is still connected in the back. There's a cut point here, which is the coolant pipe. Alright, now the ECU can just go down to the barge. And that is one of our work orders, just the coolant tank itself. Alright. Alright. So I think the next big one, and the biggest one of course in terms of money, is the reactor. So now the reactor is open. Now this reactor is still occluded here in the back by all of these panels. To get the panels off, we want to move the thrusters. To get the thrusters off, we want to move, we want to purge those fuel lines, and that can be explosive if we don't get rid of these fuel tanks first. So I'm going to come in here, get all our fuel tanks out.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
There we go. Alright. I'm gonna run back for oxygen. Oh, come on. You can pull yourself, of course, with the
Oxygen level stabilized.
and I should get some fuel while I'm here. I don't think the fuel is going to be a problem. So you can pull yourself, but it's very easy to pull yourself faster than you can brake and pull yourself into something or pull yourself off the map. So, next order of business is I want to detach these thrusters. So I hit the emergency override. They can start venting these big purple jets. If these big purple jets hit important stuff, or hit you, you'll set yourself on fire. The big concern here is if they hit fuel tanks. If they hit fuel tanks in the back, the fuel tanks will explode, and the fuel tanks will cause you much bigger problems. I think the thrusters count as mechanical too.
Reactor meltdown sequence triggered.
Uh-oh. So, the reactor is triggered. We're going to want to move this guy out of the way, because it's in the way. We have plenty of time here, but we need to act quickly. So we're going to cut these coolant lines and fuel lines. Also purging all those fuel lines, of course, is nice. I'm going to use a saw cutter. Reactor is melting down. And I don't need to get rid of all these, I need to get rid of some of them. I like to get 2 or 3. Alright, get that out of the way. Alright. Alright, now you can see the reactor is moving. That's what we want to see. Alright, now I'm just going to take it, grapple it, and send it down. Now it should just start pulling out. Now there's a reactor casing here, and the reactor is inside the reactor casing. So you want to follow this down and make sure that it gets off and registers. Because what can happen sometimes is that this reactor casing, one of these like reactor plates hits the barge and registers, but the reactor itself doesn't register as being in there. That's a very bad position to be in, as you can imagine. So we got our big payday. So I'm gonna start sending these big pieces over. Oh, I need to finish the finish the thrusters, don't I? Okay. So send the thrusters on down. The thrusters are freed up, and they all going down. Yep. The thrusters are freed up. The other mechanical thing we're going to do are the nacelles. The nacelles are mechanical. And there's 4 nacelles on the back of the ship. So we're going to pull the nacelles off. After we pull the nacelles off, we can send these big rear nanocarbon pieces to the processor. So 4 nacelles should be it for the mechanical. And that work order. A little low on time, so I'm just going to trust that those get there.
Salvage secured. Credits deposited.
This guy is pretty close to the furnace, so I want to make sure these nacelles don't get sucked into that furnace. You can tell they're moving already. Alright, going down. This nanocarbon getting pulled in, I was sloppy. And try and pull it out against the furnace, but it's pretty far gone. With these big pieces especially, it helps to use these jacks to avoid exactly what is happening there. They're just so far back in the construction bay
Valuable component incinerated.
that when you try and pull... Yep, there it goes. When you try and pull them, they get attracted by the furnace and just get sucked into the furnace. So for this big piece, I'm going to use this jack, and I'm going to pull it forward with the jack first. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And so after we pull it forward, then we're going to pull it sideways into... after we pull it forward, then we're going to pull it sideways into the processor. Pardon me. So these are great big. They take forever to move, so we're going to find other things to do. We're missing 1 mechanical. So I need to go find a mechanical piece, which is probably going to be a door hatch someplace. Here we go. can tell there are more computer terminals in there. If you were short on electrics, there's a bank of computer terminals up here. Oh, ECU never made it. The ECU is just floating down there. There we go. Alright, that's all of the work orders except the metal. So honestly, if you're just trying to grind out money in work orders, this is where I would stop. Because this aluminum is not worth a lot. Honestly, I'm going to go around. I've got a few minutes. I'm a little bit ahead of schedule. I'm just going to keep pulling off whatever I can. If you wanted to do a true whole buffalo and get everything, honestly, it's probably 4 full work periods. Just because getting every last door switch, getting every last chair, getting every last monitor and piece of luggage.
Time to start wrapping things up. We wrap.
There we go. Every last piece of luggage just takes a long time. So getting this floor, I don't even have to grapple these if I don't want. I just send them down.
Salvage deposit accepted. Credits transferred.
Uh-oh. Something was down there that didn't get locked in.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
I'm not worried about oxygen critical now because the level ends in 10 seconds.
Oxygen reserves are critical.
I go back, end the work shift for free. Nope, didn't quite get it. Alright, so 2 full work shifts. Clearly this was a much more valuable work shift. I'm going a little slow because I'm talking. Normally it's not unusual to get 7.5 million in the second work shift. The main value here, of course, are the thrusters are quite high priced. The reactor is the single largest. Computer terminals, the electronics are valuable. The power generator is $250,000 by itself. And then, you know, the seats are not a lot, but they add up. You know, everything adds up. And the cells are worth a lot on their own, etc., etc. So, one more work shift to now. The only thing that's left, we've got all our work orders done. We're gonna check for durability. That all looks pretty good. I don't know what the right place to repair is, honestly. 0%, 45%. All right, so we've got these 2 big nanocarbon pieces. We moved them forward a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to try and get those into the processor. These take forever to move. So really our goal is going to be to move these, start moving them and keep them moving, because they can take an appreciable amount of time just to float around. It's going to take a lot of tethers. Now, we've got all our work orders done, and really, you know, what's left, everything here is aluminum, right? Aluminum panels, stuff inside. So, our goal here is going to be to cut the whole thing in half. I like to take this place as the middle cut point. It's going to be a little bit challenging because this guy is moving and rotating on us. But I like to use this middle bar and use my cutter tool because it goes pretty quick. The downside of doing it here is that there's these little the corner pieces. So this is a piece, right? And that's a piece, and you'll notice there's this one little piece right here that we have to get out. So just cutting, trying to keep it centered. Because if you don't, you know, you can leave one little piece, and if that one little piece is not cut, then the whole thing doesn't come apart. And then you've got to fly all the way around figuring out what did I miss. The cutter tool is quite fast at this. You can do this with the stinger if you want, but I don't see a point to doing it that way. Anytime it doesn't line up like that, I'm very suspicious, and I usually just hit it again for good measure. And all this goes to the furnace. So now, this guy's pretty neatly lined up for the furnace. If we did everything right, this whole section can go into the furnace. And it's pulling away. It's pulling away from the front half. Now again, there's stuff in here that I could still salvage. Seats and things. Depends on how accurate, how much is really are you trying to get. If you're doing the whole thing, you're going to be more methodical than I am here. I also recognize at a certain point, you guys probably just don't want to see me pulling out chairs. Oops. Alright. So that's going to slowly make its way in. Again, these things take a long time to move around. So getting these moving sooner than later is a good idea. I don't know how many exactly, 5 or 6 tethers seem to be the mad number. Oh, we've got some keels we can clean up. Scrap metal into the furnace.
Raw material processed. Credits deposited.
That keel in there. So this is moving slowly. This guy is moving a lot faster. But they really take a long time to move. So you can see the tethers are already gone.
Warning.
And I'm out.
No tethers remaining.
So I'll go back for some tethers.
Warning. Tethers depleted.
I'll pull myself there. Just a little bit.
Welcome to Vintage.
Tethers, oxygen, fuel looks okay. Now the downside to cutting these big pieces in half and sending them to the furnace is once they get to the furnace, the game turns into a slideshow. And I'm sure that this is something that they're going to optimize as we're going along, but right now it's a slideshow. Keep an eye on these things as they're moving. For example, we're kind of scraping over here, so it makes sense to try and pull it to the right a little bit so it can... So the furnace can just naturally pull it in a little bit quicker. Just needed a lot of tethers.
Deposit accepted.
Is it moving? It's moving slowly. So, if it's moving slowly, you know, another thing we can do is cut it into more than 2 pieces. I'm not sure what affects how fast it moves, what affects the total weight that much. If I was being more careful, we could try and do the same trick we did with the airlocks, where we stay perfectly still and cut through the holes that we already made. My experience is that it doesn't work that great. Partly because we've already got tethers on this and it's already moving. Yeah, none of these on the bottom got cut at all. These wall panels are connecting it as well.
Credits deposited.
Okay. Oh, we got enough scrap. Alright, so now it's jumping around because our other side is going into that furnace. And it is gonna be a slideshow for a little bit until that all finishes. So now we're completely done. Again, the rest of the stuff in here, the aluminum is not that valuable. So unless you're just trying to be a completionist, getting every bit in, it's honestly not worth it in terms of money or work orders. I think rather than trying to cut it in half, that was kind of a spur of the moment
No tethers
idea.
remaining.
I'm just going to use as many tethers as I can fit on it. Because it moves slowly, but it moves. You can see here we've got about a whole half of a work period left. I think you could do this in 2 work. I mean, you could do all the work orders in 2 work periods if you optimize things pretty easily. You would need to make sure. Come on. What would you need to make sure? You would just need to make sure you've got a good supply of aluminum somewhere. So I don't know what piece you cut off to make it float.
Caution. Tether supplies running low.
While we're going slow, I'll just go ahead and pick up some things.
Material deposited.
We've got lots of seats we can pull out. That seat was destroyed.
Salvage secured. Credits deposited.
Oops. Yikes.
Helmet damage detected.
Gotta be careful.
Salvage deposit accepted. Credits transferred.
Alright, and my tethers are all gone again. So again, moving this stuff. I wonder if we might be caught in the pull of the, might be caught in the pull of the processor a little bit. I wonder if that's slowing us down.
Deposit accepted.
Welcome to Ventatron 9000.
Oh, come on.
Cutter, you got 5 minutes left in this shift. Knock out that work order before they turn the lights out on you. We wrap.
Caution. Tether supplies are low.
Moving slowly but surely.
Warning. No tethers remaining.
Really, probably the right solution here is to cut it into more pieces.
Welcome to Ventatron 9000.
I wonder if the 2 airlocks in part make it heavier. I'm not sure. There's a lot of door frames on this cut point, so it's probably better if I don't try and cut this in the middle. Cut. Just one. Looks like it lines up. Looks like we've got a clean cut all the way around, except for whatever this is. Yep, there we go. Now we're separated. Okay. Pull this aluminum in. Now this by itself is just aluminum and should be pretty light. So it's moving rapidly. Now this piece is moving a little faster. Before I had 10 or 20 tethers on this and it wasn't moving, right? And now I've got 5 tethers on it and it's moving. So something about, you know, it hits some critical mass where it just doesn't move. Which I don't think that's how physics works, but you can see it feels to me like it's getting pulled into the processor too. So I'm going to try and pull it this way a little bit. See if we can't get this in 2 minutes.
Caution. Tether supplies running low. Warning. Tethers depleted.
Aluminum isn't worth a lot, but it's worth more than what we're spending on tethers. That's an interesting question to look at it. But the tether is... Tethers are only 5,000 a pop, so we can buy a lot of tethers for what it costs to... I don't know how much we'll get out of this aluminum. But it's more than that. Alright, we're pretty good. And this is definitely the place now where this piece should be affected by the furnace's natural pull. I just want you to go as fast as possible.
Caution.
See if we can't get this in. Now we're moving. Cooking with gas, as they say. If this had moved faster, I would have been spending all this time cleaning up pieces, storage bin. A lot of this is scrap that would go in the furnace, aluminum panels, you know, this stuff gets put places.
No tethers remaining.
Alright, so we got it just in the nick of time, it looks like. We're going to have another slideshow here in a second, I suspect. 5 seconds left. Yep, here comes the slideshow. So, I should have identified that second cut before. It was just moving too slow. I don't know why it was moving that slow, honestly. So again, our least lucrative work order or work shift, but again, if you want to use the entire ship, that's essentially how you do it. There are some variations, right? So on top, sometimes you'll have sensor towers, you'll have antenna. One of the variations here in this class 4 is you can have toxic waste, or I think, you know, basically the toilet recyclers or whatever. You can have a waste machine on top that has cut points you need to cut away. But this is essentially the approach that you'd use. Some ships have 1 airlock, some have 2. But all the hazards that you saw are what you're going to see in this class 4, right? There's the ECU and the coolant. How do you flush the ECU and the coolant? How do you deal with the fuses? How do you get that reactor out from the bottom? And then an approach to dealing with everything else. So our main value here in this last, you can see, even though we recycled, you know, the entire aluminum interior hull, the nanocarbon that we got from the back thrusters, right, was still enough. I should also say, on these back nanocarbon big panels that we sent to the processor are these thruster caps. These thruster caps also go to the processor, so you can just send the whole thing into the processor. It's fine. Don't need to treat it differently. Seats, again, a big line item for this third workday. The keel, the titanium, seems not to be that valuable. You'd think the titanium would be valuable, but not. The aluminum here, we have 20,000 kilograms, by far you know, by weight, the biggest thing, not just the aluminum panels, but the structural aluminum, and we get maybe 300,000 credits for it. So the glass from around the reactor enclosure, right, that we sent in with sent into the furnace, it goes to the furnace, but it's there's a lot of glass with a lot of geometry, and it just doesn't make sense to try and cut out the glass by itself. But we sent the whole reactor enclosure to the furnace with one half of the inner hull. This glass is almost a third for that one room, a third of the credits that we get for doing all the aluminum and the rest of the inner hull. So, again, aluminum is not worth your time unless you're trying to grind out certifications or something. Anyway, so that's the Class 4 Gecko, torn down completely with all the hazards illustrated and some approaches to getting those big pieces into the processor and the furnace. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think.